Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Ask Me Anything from the Academy of Animated Art. My name is Mike Tanzillo, and tonight, along with our Academy of Animated Art students, we've got the great and handsome and charming and lovely John Kalaigian here with us. John and I have been working together for probably about a decade. John has worked he's a senior technical director at Blue Sky Studios. He's worked in multiple departments, including an assembly department, which I had no idea what that meant, and he's going to explain to us here in a minute. But the big reason we had John on tonight is that you are like a chairman of something. Like, what's your official title at SIGGRAPH?
So for 2021, I'll be taking on the production sessions chair position. But the great thing about SIGGRAPH and the direction that they've turned towards onboarding people who are not necessarily familiar or volunteered with the committees or the events in the past is they'll onboard you. So in this past, I would say 8 months, I've been getting my hands and feet into the process of following the 2020 chair, Derek Now, who was also last year's production sessions chair, and joined his subcommittee to midstream get ramped up for 2020. Obviously, with the situation that we all fell into a couple of months back, no one anticipated the outcome that we would force SIGGRAPH to turn to a virtual platform. But like I said, many times jumping into many different ventures, if I don't get the hardest possible scenario to train on, then I'm probably not going to do a good job when it's my turn. So it's been a very enlightening experience. It's a very trying process under normal circumstances. It takes a good 18 months or so to plan a conference. So it's been phenomenal to see people unfortunately have to be forced to dealing with the stresses that we're dealing with, but coming up with wonderful content and a way to deliver it to our audience. So
That's great. So we will get into that in just a second, but I just want to find out a little bit more about you. So John, so you went to NYU for your master's degree, right?
Yep.
Okay, and then you started working in the city on commercial projects?
Yes.
Okay.
So I got into the industry, thankfully, because of SIGGRAPH. Before my sojourn into grad school, I was working in the medical imaging field at a cancer research hospital in New York. And luckily, they allowed us one conference a year to attend. And so there was a designated radiology conference that I would either get into or get a paper accepted and attend. And in that particular year, in 2003, I didn't get accepted. So I had the funds and I looked around, and SIGGRAPH was always at the footnote of every publication I was reading, given the amount of research in that particular realm. So I said, let me take a chance and attend the conference. And it was one of those moments, aha moments, where my left brain and my right brain engage at the same time. And it's kind of like a no sense looking back, only look forward to satisfy the creative urge of working in film and animation, which I've always had since I was very young. So attending NYU and meeting a fantastic group of friends, many of whom I still work with at the studio. It's really been a fortunate experience. So I have to say, SIGGRAPH was kind of the fire, and it's gotten me all the way here. And now the irony is, after all these years, being able to assume the role of production sessions chair, which was probably one of the first style of presentation formats that SIGGRAPH offers. Back then, I don't think it was called production sessions, but it's kind of like the Comic-Con of all the events at SIGGRAPH, where you get the biggest show reels and the most butts and seats, biggest attended event outside of electronic theater. So it's kind of humbling to be, and I also was able to present back in, I think it was 2014 in Vancouver for Rio 2. So it's kind of paying back a little bit to where I started. So I'm very humbled and honored.
That's incredible. When you came out of school, you started doing, you started working for effects houses in the city. What type of work were you doing? And what were you doing on the projects?
So I couldn't do anything but somehow manage to do camera tracking jobs for a better part of a year. And that got me really frustrated because I kind of geared my education at NYU as kind of a jack of all trades. I had a programming background when I was in medical imaging and a comp sci and mathematics degree in undergrad. So when science and art met, I felt like it was something that would get me into either lighting or compositing or some kind of technical skill set that allowed me to do a little bit of scripting, a little bit of programming. But long story short, just to get your feet in the door, the hard way is to take tracking jobs in my unique case. But it's humbling. I kind of bit off more than I could chew at some points when I started getting the jobs that I wanted to, which ultimately led to leading projects, small teams, 5, 10 people working together. The great thing about working in a place like New York, just like in other commercial hotspots throughout the world, is the amount of talent that you can not only learn from, but befriend and really like develop lasting relationships with people. It was invaluable. When I said I bit off more than I could chew, is that I started taking on so many different tasks that I said, wow, it's great income, but it's not a lot of vacation time because you just can't say no. And that attitude of you're only good as your last job. And that kept me going for a better part of 6 years. But kind of got to a point where I started to reprioritize and looking at things more holistically. But it was a great experience, which I'll never take back.
So 6 years of working on commercial projects, and then you came up to Blue Sky?
Yep.
And you came in, and I was saying this before we started, you were a part of a department called the Assembly Department, which when I started there, I had no idea what that meant. I don't know if you had an idea what that meant when you took the job, but can you describe what assembly, or it's now procedural propagation. Can you just describe what that department is and what your contribution is to the film?
I'm still waiting on somebody to tell me.
Yeah.
So, but in a nutshell, in a typical workflow, you have a modeling department. Well, let's come down a little bit more. You have a design department, and of course, they want to design every single variety of, in the case of the Rio 2, palm trees. They want to have 30 different heights, 30 different, leaf patterns. And then of course, some producer or executive will say, well, what's the minimum amount you can build? And we'll figure out the rest in as far as creating the complexity and irregularity of nature. So typically we would get like a small, medium, and large of any variety of tree from modeling. And our system, which was procedural in nature in as far as you scatter points on a ground plane, and those points assign themselves to either a tree, a rock. We've even used them for characters, background, midground characters that don't really need to be animated, but imagine just having like a cycle on a particular character. So in that sense, procedural propagation was take a limited amount of assets and resources and create the complexity in how you group things and scatter them and manipulate the composition to camera for the most part, but also keeping in mind that you have stereo and layout concerns and things like that. So it was a very integral department in as far as we had to interact with the animation departments, the layout, the lighting. We were kind of the ones guarding the set, so to speak, because once we started working with the art directors and realizing their vision outside of previs and then handing off to, let's say, a layout department, we would then make sure that whatever we were creating, which sometimes got extremely complex and heavy, that downstream like lighting could ingest that information and not spend too many hours after hours trying to get through a render for one of our sets.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate combination of aesthetics and technical balance, because you guys have to help build these environments that are so complex forests, cities. You guys would have to do cars and traffic and all this different stuff. And then once like park cars around the city, and then but you had to make it complex enough to be visually interesting, but simple enough to where you can actually open the file and still work in there and not take 200 gigs of RAM to load the file or something. So it's a really interesting job. And you've done other stuff at Blue Sky. You were in character simulation, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So starting with Spies in Disguise, I transitioned to doing a little bit more of the type of work I was doing when I was freelance, which is more aesthetically involved with animation, and as far as garments need to be silent but present. They need, if it's distracting, then it's not visually appealing. So it was riding that balance of how much complexity can you create and still stay on target with the intended look of the particular film.
Mm.
So it was very gratifying to kind of go back into doing some simulation work, which is stuff that I used to do more regularly when I was a freelancer.
Great. So I just want to give everyone a brief overview of John because I think his career is fascinating and I think he's an incredibly interesting dude. But let's talk about SIGGRAPH a little bit this year, right? So SIGGRAPH was originally planned. It was going to be in DC this year, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then COVID hit and everything went to hell.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the convention center, I don't know if it's still designated as a healthcare overflow center, but that originally was where we were going to have the convention held. So it was a very kind of up to the final second decision from the city of or from the district of Columbia. So it kind of turned out to be what it is. Having seen other conferences like GDC and the routes they've taken, we wanted to make sure that the content didn't suffer because of the circumstances. So it's still going through all the paces, vetting all the contributions as per our regular schedule. Although we knew COVID was happening, it actually changed our in-person jury event to a gigantic 3-day virtual jury, which again, I don't know any better because I didn't do this before, but to see kind of this amazing amount of coordination by the committees to get this entire process and not lose any steam. I think we've originally supposed to have the conference at the end of July, and now we're pushing it only a couple of weeks into August. So
yeah, so let's start there. Let's go through some basic info. So when is the event when is SIGGRAPH taking place this year? Or first off, SIGGRAPH is taking place, right? Yes.
SIGGRAPH is definitely taking place.
Cool.
So
when is it going down?
Sure. The event format is going to be slightly different to accommodate the online content. So starting on August 17th, it's kind of a pre-conference on-demand viewing week. So I think it's from the 17th to the 23rd, if I'm not wrong. Basically, as an attendee, and they still have various subscription levels, just like if you were going to the actual conference, so you only get to see certain parts of the programs. You can always upgrade just like you could in the live conference. But during that first week, they basically want you to go out, watch as much content as you can for the various programs that have available content that's pre-recorded. And then the following week is the actual conference week, where you can have live sessions or what we're calling simulive, additional pre-recorded content, but you have live panelists providing answers to questions that have been curated over the previous week. And also that content will be made available through October 17th. So more so than the traditional SIGGRAPH where you only get 4 days of conference and then content moves into SIGGRAPH's digital library system, the 2020 content will be available on the Hub platform through October 17th.
How are people going to be presenting? Is it just going to be like they're going to record themselves on like a Zoom or like some sort of screen capture and they'll be able to like share their screen and that kind of thing? Like what's the format of these presentations that people will be watching?
It pretty much breaks down to that. The pre-records are going to be very similar to that. What we haven't really gone through to have a lot of expertise, but we have chosen a platform called Hub, H-U-B-B, and that basically is going to be the virtual SIGGRAPH. So there will be pre-recorded sessions that will be available while, similar to Zoom, you're playing, let's say, a screen share, and your panelists will be present, and then you'll have your Q&A sessions live from the attendees. So that is kind of the direction that this year's conference is going. And quite frankly, I think you said it at the preamble to this, this direction going virtual is something that can accommodate a lot of people who can't make conferences under normal circumstances, either due to travel restrictions or budgets and things like that. So the fact that we're exploring it for this year doesn't necessarily mean it's a one and done. It also doesn't mean it's going to persist, but it's a unique opportunity and something that SIGGRAPH has been thinking about because obviously budgets are what they are. And like I said, I've also wanted to go and studios have decided that no, either you can't go year after year or other restrictions. So this is a great compromise in my mind. And
Yeah.
the prices are.
I was excited to go this year, and then I found out in December my wife was pregnant and going to be we're going to be having our little girl in a few weeks, and I was like, well, that's not going to work out at all. So I actually will be able to participate now, and I'm very excited about that. So it's it does, and for people who, like I said, don't live on the west coast of the U.S. or aren't like can't handle it because it's expensive to go to SIGGRAPH. It can't handle the finances of it. This is a great opportunity. So I want to ask you, like, what are you most, as a non-SIGGRAPH committee member, like as just a dude who likes this stuff, what are you most excited about this year?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see content like immersive technologies. Obviously, requires particular hardware, but being able to stream that content out to the attendees, seeing how electronic theater is going to work. You know, you're so used to seeing this large venue hall. There's just so many people. It's such an overwhelming experience, but to try to connect people together, which I should say that electronic theater is being handled by a slightly different platform. It's not going to be on the regular platform that accommodates the remainder of the conference. But just trying to see how everyone is going to communicate and interact as if they're present and physically in the same space. Because again, there's nothing that could replace a live conference. There's relationships that are formed, there are questions that just spawn spur of the moment, you know, the things that just you cannot replicate in a virtual setting, but it's interesting to try a different approach. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely positives to be gained from this type of experience.
That's great. Yeah, and actually I didn't preface you on any of this, so you may not know this information. In terms of like, are there going to be companies there that are interviewing for positions? Is it still going to be like that hub of people looking for jobs?
I will say that the platform does allow for sponsors to reach out to the attendees. So I imagine, although I don't have a lot of information to back it up, that they will still extend the same courtesy to studios that are, you know, basically there to headhunt, the job fair and things like that. I imagine it's such a big part of SIGGRAPH that it's they're trying not to eliminate anything from the normal programming. They're just trying to find ways that they can accommodate. So, you know, the ideas of kind of social networking roundtables or kind of like speed networking type of things where you get to meet with someone really quickly, exchange information, and keep that conversation going. I think it's essential.
As a student or someone looking to first come into the industry, because SIGGRAPH can be a little overwhelming in the amount of electronic theater, there's all these presentations, there's all this stuff going on. What should somebody who's just getting their feet wet in the industry, what should they focus on, and what do you think that they would get the most value out of?
I would say under a normal conference year, always plan on having your agenda right from the start, but also plan on plan B, plan C, and plan D, because inevitably you're going to go into a talk, it's going to sound amazing, and then you're going to say, this is either over my head or I already read something about this and it's just kind of very familiar. So always being kind of able to run around the convention hall and know where your next talk is going to be is critical. Over the years, SIGGRAPH has gotten a lot better at tracking, and the apps do a lot better job of, you know, figuring out where it is you want to go and what's nearby that's interesting, or what's starting, or what room may have hit capacity. So from that aspect, what I used to do in 2003, which was, you know, San Diego Convention Hall, run around from one hall to another, definitely pack a lot of, you know, snacks because you're going to burn a lot of calories getting around. I can't make any kind of guesses on what a virtual format's going to be like this year. So just make sure you're properly hydrated no matter what. Make sure your seat is very comfortable. So
that's what I always tell people at conferences. Is like just make sure you always have water with you, because those places are dry and you will just you just get exhausted in those. So that's great. So I do want to open this up and make sure that we're having questions from anyone. So you guys can either just chime in or unmute yourselves and speak up, or you can write in the chat window, however you prefer. But I'm going to I'll keep asking away. So, what would be something like if as an educator or somebody for the Academy of Animated Art, like how could I contribute to SIGGRAPH? Like what would be a way that we could give back to help out?
I think one of the best resources at SIGGRAPH is the Birds of a Feather. And I think it's a great way to meet like-minded people who share common interest. There are a lot of conversations and information exchange outside of the normal channels at SIGGRAPH. You could be having lunch with someone. Next thing you know, they invite you over and you're chatting at a round table, kind of ad hoc style. There are a lot of educational opportunities focusing primarily on how to teach animation, how to teach visual effects, staying abreast of modern technologies and how to incorporate them into an academic setting. Those typically are not the areas that I tend to focus on when I go into SIGGRAPH, but I've been fortunate enough to pass by one of those. And it's always gratifying because if nothing more, SIGGRAPH always leaves you with that sense of you're exhausted, but you're always coming back with this new vitality and energy. Like you saw the most amazing things, and I'm sure other conferences like GDC do the same thing. It puts you through the ringer, but you're glad you went. So
no, it's always a rewarding experience for me. Amy, you said that you've been to SIGGRAPH conferences before, right? Like what's your main takeaway? Like what's your main positives from the experience?
I think it's just like seeing what everyone's created that year and like what you can take from that and try and reach for the following year. And you as you said, you get this buzz after the conference that you are exhausted because you have been running around, you've been having late night meetings or going for a drink with someone that you've just met, and it is exhausting, but it's almost like it's so rewarding to go. And I would highly recommend anyone that hasn't been to SIGGRAPH to definitely go, because it's one of my favorite trips I've ever been on. And I have made a lot of contacts in the industry via just randomly bumping into people, looking at the same show or whatever. And you do get that kind of revitalized energy that for a good few months afterwards, you're like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to do this. So I just say anyone that has ever thought about going, just save up. And if your company's not treating you to or whatever, definitely go at some point in your life. That's
a really great advice, because my memory from my first SIGGRAPH is being at a party, and there was an older gentleman who was just being like mobbed by people, and I'd never seen him before. And I asked a friend, I was like, "Who's that guy?" And he was like, "That's Jim Blinn. That guy wrote the Blinn shader." And I was like, "Oh dang!" And he was just like living his best life. He had people all around him. He was talking. I was like, and I just love this idea that this guy goes 364 days a year of just being like a normal dude, whatever, just living his life. And then every once in a while he gets to go to SIGGRAPH, and he is like the celebrity of all celebrities. So I always feel
special for that one day of the year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he wrote a thing that everybody uses all the time, or we used to anyway. And so that's
fantastic.
Before I get into anything else, does anyone else have any questions? Anybody else want to hop in? Kels, I see you've got your face mask on. Well done, sir. All right, cool.
So what other than SIGGRAPH, what's your favorite project that you've worked on? I know you mentioned Spy in Disguise and Rio 2, but is there any certain area of the project that you really enjoyed and you recommend for someone or whatever?
Mike, I think you know the answer to this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done what I did to my cubicle.
So I wish I had a photo. So John at work turned his entire cubicle into Snoopy's doghouse. And when I say that, I don't mean like it is massive and insane and real. And like, it's like, how tall is it? It's like 10 feet tall.
Almost. They're fire, paraphernalia and pipes that need to be, respected.
Oh, our facilities people were not pleased with it, I'm sure, because it
No, not at all.
blocks the sprinkler system.
I built our floor space at work is 6x8, so I said, okay, I have to fit within that, otherwise my neighbors are going to hate me. But also I have this tendency to try to go for accuracy wherever possible. So footprint wise, it's nearly 8 feet tall, but I also built a Snoopy to go on top because you can't just have a doghouse without Snoopy.
That's awesome.
And the Snoopy became a Halloween costume. So that is the order. It wasn't costume first, then dressing for the house. It was always meant for the house. But no, I loved Peanuts as a kid. It was nothing but elation when I found out we were going to be working on the film, and I was still in set dressing. So it was a challenge to recreate. Every department had challenges on that film to recreate the signature style, but it was the kind of, pleasure, pain. Like, I know this is going to be great. This is my childhood, recreated in, modern times. So it was such a pleasure. And, yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Let's see if I'm going to share my screen for just a second because I just pulled up an image of your desk at work. Let's see. So if anyone can see it. So this is John's desk.
That's
here.
Amazing.
And then this is the guy who sits next to him, Ike, he must have been inspired by you, I assume.
He asked me to build it.
Yeah, oh, you built that too?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
So if you want to go speak to John, you got to go into you got to knock, like you always awkwardly knock on the wall here because he has his back to you, and I think my signature is somewhere over here. Yep. To the side. Yeah,
and that's the other wonderful thing about the studio. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have signed the walls of the doghouse, and it's just like one of those things that, like, it's really special, and I'm so sad that I'm not there right now to actually enjoy it. But
I bet when you're working in that sort of environment as well, you kind of have that state of mind of you're not in an office, you're in that free space of that you've created, and your creativity runs wild then.
And the best part is it has a curtain too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a good point because, like, we have people who have made their spaces unique to all of our projects. Being away from the office, as much as I don't like commuting to work, I do miss that space. And John, do you have a friend with you?
You asked. You brought this on yourself. So this is Dora. She's one of our two Sphinx cats, but right now she just wants to pull my headphones out of my head. And then, well, they just had dinner, so Milo's her brother, and he's zooming around on a full belly, which is probably not going to be a good thing for him.
One of my first Zoom meetings with John after everything hit, we were just talking, all of a sudden the Sphinx cat just hopped on his shoulder, and I was like, John, what the hell is that? what you got going on there, buddy? And and they've been as much of a member of my life as anybody else has been right now. So it's been really good.
That's awesome.
So and just so you guys know, so when John says that he goes all out with things, he really does. One of your other Halloween costumes is you did a full Spaceballs, Rick Moranis as Darth helmet. Has anyone ever seen? So a giant, like, shoulder width size helmet on his head that was fully functional, and it was remarkable. It was one of those.
Did you say it? I forget. It was one of our meetings. It was like, if you're gonna wear a mask out because of COVID, like, you should wear the helmet. Like, that's the best perfect.
just wear it, man. Yeah, totally. All right. I just want to open up. Anybody else have any questions for John? It's getting a little late here, so I want to make sure. Go. Kels, do you have anything? You're good. All right. John, I want to thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us tonight. It's a pleasure to work with you. I miss you. Hopefully we get to see each other soon, but I will definitely, just in speaking to you about SIGGRAPH, I'm very excited about it. I'm definitely going to partake. And guys, I'll make a birds of a feather thing for the Academy of Animated Arts and lighting students, so we can hopefully get some people together and talk and just have some fun. So John, thank you very much. I will see you in a meeting in 12 hours.
There you go. Absolute pleasure, and thank you everybody for being a part of this. And I hope you have a wonderful summer, and hope to see you in virtual SIGGRAPH.
And anybody in Canada, very happy Canada Day to you.
Happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Talk to you all soon. All right. Thank you again, John. Bye.
Bye.